Thank you all for coming, and indeed for returning after a rather tremendous lunch. I am Kyrie Caldwell, and my thesis arises from the study of video games, a topic near and dear to my heart as a long-term game player. This is my latest step in my journey of making my hobby my academic work. And this step has been a particularly lush one as this project is manifested and been forged into what now looms here. The last time I presented a comparable work with my undergrad thesis, sort of comparable, I felt the need to justify why I was studying games, or why anyone would study games. But now I have been embedded in communities doing just that, or this one, in which even those who do not study games recognize them as a medium that, like those you've heard about in other presentations today, is a really rich place for considering the artifacts that people spend hours, weeks, years, and lives creating and savoring. So, with that, I will lead you all through this thesis, including its goals and theories, the theoretical foundations upon which it rests, and illustrations of my analyses. Accompanying all this are images of the games that have led me here, either inspirationally or as examples of, in my work, of past and present, and likely future as well. Not all of the games pictured will be discussed, as in the case of this one, but rather they lend an aesthetic framing, the visual depictions of my research site within games, and in some cases a bright foil to the rather more dark and dreary aspects that I'm critiquing within that research site. Right, so, as I've mentioned, I'm not here to justify the study of games. Game critics write with the authority and the poetics of art and film critics, penning weighty critiques of the works of the industry's auteurs who tackle those mainstays of the human condition, war, loss, love, and so forth. The artistic merit of games has been measured in coffee table books and tears alike, always with the argument that such beautiful images and such manifestations of human emotion can only be the product of an art on par with those of a longer history. Although certainly not always the case, so often the most publicly visible parts of game criticism, like games journalism, these poignant moments and beautiful expressions happen in the parts of games that are most recognizable from other media, the story and the audiovisual assets. However, crucially, the medium also, at least in most cases, requires a player whose interactions shape how the game unfolds, and without which the game cannot proceed. Thus, the ways in which the player is able to interact with with the system of the game are a defining part of the potential experiences of a game. This is more often noted and treated in non-mainstream academic game criticism, but it's not uncommon for this treatment to operate through the language and current aesthetics of software design. For example, beauty in game design is found in simplicity and clarity, or ease of use, and can be separated from the story or art assets, where beauty may instead be found in emotional complexity, or diegetic twists and turns, or the blending of many lines and colors and forms or sounds. But that separation between game design and game stories and art seems tenuous to me. What I find more interesting than their separation is instead what Jesper Juhl, in his book Half Real, calls the interplay between rules and fiction. That is, I am interested in how a game's rules and fiction interact with and affect each other, especially if not exclusively, where they conflict and may present meaning-making opportunities in discord with the others. To introduce my research questions and my topic of study, I move back to my original point around poignancy, affect, and beauty to be found in games, those popular measures of the medium's artistic merit. How does one read, in the literary theory sense, a game that presents such beautiful affect in either its narrative or rules when those conflict? Or how does one read rules that consistently conflict with particular games' narratives, even when the latter are being praised for being poignant and reflective of progressive social ideals? Indeed, games fiction and world building increasingly contribute really interesting and important critiques of social systems like gender, race, class, politics, organized religion, and so forth. Yet, what happens to these critiques or messages when a game's rules instead model problematic aspects of these social systems, which may then be implemented in several games or even a whole genre? And considering how one must treat both a game's rules and fiction in order to understand that interplay, most importantly, are a game's rules and narrative actually as separable as a game review, for example, might have one think? This project identifies and investigates a particular site in which these conditions exist, a site I named warm interaction, which I will define presently. In order to reach a greater understanding of how representation functions in the overlap between games, rules, and fictions, I aim to analyze how warm interactions are reflected in games' rules, also known as their mechanics, and how those mechanics reproduce problematic schema of interpersonal interaction, emotionality, and gender, even when those mechanics are rethemed within socially innovative or otherwise rewarding narratives and built worlds. But first, there is a lot going on in there, so I will pull out key terms to specify what I mean by each. Warm interaction is a term I've coined for my research site, which is just one aspect of how a player character might interact with other characters in a game, a process which is paramount to the enactment that creates the read or played text of a game. In warm interaction, I refer to interactions of positive valence, or ones that rely on the happier side of affect, warm as in warm and fuzzy feelings. Those interactions are actualized in game mechanics, are actions taken in a cooperative spirit, namely caretaking and the building of friendly or romantic relationships. But what are game mechanics? Though it's a contested term in game studies, here I use Miguel Sicard's quite useful text defining game mechanics to do just that. Game mechanics are methods invoked by agents designed for interaction with the game state, i.e. the ways in which a player is able to affect what happens in the game, usually mediated through a controller or a similar device. Mechanics, which I also discuss as game rules, game systems, or procedural modes, a conflation of terms that unfortunately hide some key differences for the sake of brevity, are the systems through which game design, the creator side, affects gameplay, the player side. So then, what is a game narrative? Yule, who I have already mentioned, discusses games fiction as a narrative by way of several definitions, from the act of delivering a story, chronologies, archetypical chronologies, and/or prescribed events, themes, fictional worlds, and the process of meaning-making. Yule's elaboration on fictional worlds is of particular interest, as that idea, known and studied elsewhere as world building, includes modes of creative storytelling and story interpretation that are well suited to the affordances, design archetypes, and player literacies of digital games. Those modes include a game's graphics/visual information, sound and oral information, text and written information, cutscenes, which are film-like clips that do not allow for or allow for more limited player input, like a QuickTime event. Paratext, the objects and materials around the game, such as its title and/or subtitle, packaging, written guides like manuals, fan discussions, media coverage, etc. Haptics and tactile information, particularly controller vibration, Yule's definition. These things like in the last slide kind of buzz with certain actions in certain games. But the kind of haptic side can also potentially include the more general feel and physicality of meeting devices like controllers. Rules and systemic information, notably, and players' contribution of time and effort. Gordon Kaye's model, which is shown here with rather small text, presents game narrative as realms of player involvement, which works in 6 dimensions: kinesthetic, avatar control, spatial for settings, shared interaction between characters and players, narrative, which are pre-scripted and written out, affective, drama and like emotional arcs, and ludic, rules and constraints. These dimensions occur on 2 levels or phases: the micro, specific choices and management within particular sessions of a game experience, which is the lighter gray, and macro, which is a lasting impression of the overall game experience. So game narrative is multifaceted and complex and has strong overlaps with game mechanics, but not always in practice. So before jumping into my examples, let me linger for a bit on my theory. Game studies is rather notoriously interdisciplinary, often locating in scholars in other disciplines departments like this one. So my main fields of reference are most obviously game studies and media studies, but with my emphasis on social critique, especially of gender, feminist studies also undergirds my work via its epistemologies as well as methodologies and topics of study. Those main fields also overlap in subfields like emotion and affect studies, performance studies, which I've used before in linking gameplay with religious practice, and cultural area studies, particularly in my case, Japanese studies, as many of the games I work with were created in Japan. So the book shown here, Catherine and Pfister's How Games Move Us, Emotion by Design, is quite new, published in the last few weeks, in fact, with plenty of journalistic coverage to accompany that. I bring that up to note where the conversation on games and emotion is at the moment in both game studies, from whence the book comes, and public perceptions of games, which has been referenced in the coverage of the book. In the book, Pfister considers the ways in which game designers have set up the possibility of emotional experiences in games, particularly in game mechanics. My work notes that this is the case and assumes that games can be, are, and have for some time acted as sites for emotional experiences. Then it pushes a bit further. As games do move us, what sorts of things are they moving us towards? And are the messages that game design presents aligning with messages that game narratives present? So, I've tackled those questions through structural analysis, a kind of semiotic text-based analysis that has been made famous by Umberto Eco and Roland Barthes in particular. Structural analysis allows me to come through the massive complex texts that games can be to find particular patterns that I can then analyze on one level, how that pattern works in a specific text or game, and then critique it on another, how it works in aggregate across texts. Though I couldn't find an image of him smoking, Jesper Juhl's work, as mentioned, has also been formative in my sampling and finding what kinds of patterns I can study in games. Notably, these theorists are all European white guys, which somewhat clashes with the feminist epistemologies mentioned. Thus, I also give a shout to Diane Carr, who has done much to adapt such literary and filmic methods to the study of games, as well as the many, many other women and non-binary folks and people of color who study games. Hint, there's at least one in this department. So here too is a methodology present in my thesis. Much of my other theory comes from social scientific disciplines, where women are doing work on those who play games, very much including women, as I'm interested in how such work comes to bear on text-based work through respecting social scientific works, methodological strengths, and the limitations of my own methods. And with that, I come to my analysis. Returning to warm interaction, caretaking is illustrated in two ways, healing and protection. Healing, too, has two forms, one more ethereal and one more physical. In these images, we see women from three different games of the same role-playing game series, Final Fantasy, 10, 4, and 14, demonstrating white or curative magic, which they draw upon in order to restore health in the form of depletable hit points and disabling afflictions like being poisoned. Here we see what healing looks like with male characters in two action games, Metal Gear Solid 3 and Killer 7. Different aesthetics of recovery are called upon. The medical and business like cleaning up of death. The text here says that Garshin is a cleaner, and he goes and recovers dead bodies in order to make them whole. It's a cookie game. But although the characters shown here are not so narratively different from those in the previous slide, as the protagonist and one character amongst several that are at the player's beck and call, the women call upon magic protagonist, party member, bit of both. The women call upon magic learned through emotional work over time, mastering skills through tending to others for the purpose of better tending to others. The men, however, tend to themselves, like a snake, or dead others through skills seemingly innate to them, i.e. made available to the player early in the game without having to build such skills through repeated gameplay. On the other side of this caretaking coin is protection, which very often takes physical form in games. Most visible is action-adventure games' escort missions, in which the player character is deemed responsible for the safety of the non-player character. The player loses if either character is killed or otherwise becomes not okay, such as kidnapped by baddies. Here, Leon of Resident Evil 4 extracts the American president's daughter, Ashley, who's up there, from the zombie-infested some European land. In some parts of the game, which, say, have difficult combat situations, the player is given the action to tell Ashley to wait in some kind of conveniently placed container as Leon, the player character, trots off to dispose of zombies. Here, the boy Eiko leads Yorda around the castle, solving puzzles to aid their escape, whilst fighting off shadow beings up there, attempting to drag Yorda into their shadow holes. One of the buttons on the player's controller is mapped to allow the player to call out to Yorda, centering the mediating camera on her, and to hold her hand if she's close enough. Yorda and Ashley both have the bad habit of wandering off towards enemy hordes, so that the player character must come and rescue. For Leon, that narrative obligation is professional. For Eiko, is personal. He feels compelled to help Yorda, apparently. For both, protection is an often annoying duty of physically minding, keeping visual sight of, and destroying any threats to a female character who has little understanding of what to do to mitigate her own suffering, let alone protect herself in any way entirely.
You are the wind at my back and the sword at my side. Together, my love, we shall build a peaceful world. Just you and me.
Then there are mechanics of love and friendship in games. Here, Crumb from Fire Emblem Awakening confesses his love for a female player character. The game presents a choice in the player character's gender. Although this confession scene has all the trappings of an adorable love story, sparkles and soft music and honeyed words, the way that love story comes to pass is less meet-cute and more militaristic. Fighting together means staying together, means fighting better together. In many games with such mechanics for building romantic and friendly relationships, the template works like this. The player character has a choice of potential love objects. The player character initiates courtship via time spent with, goods given to, or number of enemies slain alongside the chosen love object. The love object falls in love with the player character, and the love object produces some sort of benefit for the player character. In Fire Emblem, that benefit is a child, which note the heteronormativity and kind of narrative of reproductive value, who becomes a powerful character who can then be recruited into the player's army. Friendships don't produce children, but they do make friends better at fighting together. Thus, romantic and friendly relationships can be written as the perfect site of warm interactions where both parties are happy and healthy and they're caring for one another. But they're implemented in gameplay as a way to make player characters more powerful in their martial pursuits. As I move towards conclusions, I know I earlier mentioned Final Fantasy XIV, shown again here, which is an MMORPG, a massively multiplayer online role-playing game. In that game, and ones like it, many of my analytical results break down. Players are able to customize their character more deeply than in most single-player games, and often have a fair amount of choice of which role to play in a group. The roles to choose from usually take one of three forms, which create a group dynamic that balances roles, so that each player has a particular function to fulfill through their labors. There's the tank, the protector of a group who draws and keeps enemy attention, the DPS, damage per second, whose job is to maximize how much damage is being done to an enemy, which can only be done if they're not being killed by said enemy, and the healer, who makes sure the tank and everyone else stays alive. Although in promotional materials like the image I showed earlier, the gendering of such roles is, as my analyses have found, men protect the party, women heal the protectors, and some mix of either do damage. Yet, as these roles are filled by people who customize their characters, the gendering of these roles varies in-game, so that my small female character, Gansensei, can tank with a great axe, as well as any big guy could. Unlike single-player games, MMO creators place greater emphasis on designing social experiences for the messier mix of desires of actual people, whose desires may not align with the boxes into which their gender might sort them, which is great, and could potentially be a model for lessening or even eliminating the gendering of roles in single-player games. And this leads me to my conclusions. The ways in which games can afford affective experiences are unique to the medium, but the unique aspects are often not the ones allowing for positive interpersonal affect. Yet games are, I posit, still an affective medium, one that could deal with further exploration of how affects can be experienced within games and how game design and narrative can strengthen each other rather than conflict. Also, analyzing games as text is a tricky undertaking, one that is necessarily interdisciplinary. Luckily, game studies is also interdisciplinary, so textual approaches within have much to gain from relying on that aspect for critical work in the future, especially for social-driven text like MMOs, or for offering design alternatives for problematic models. I hope to be amongst the game scholars doing that work in the future, but for now, thank you for letting me share with you this stuff. Anika, yes?
Towards the end, you brought up the example of MMOs, and you cited a couple of functions. You mentioned the tipping pool, for example. I'm wondering if, when you were looking at, and then you mentioned that the ways in which gender exists, or the messy desires of real people, designing around those social interactions provide a solution for sort of gender binaries in single-player games. My question is, to what extent it could be both, but to what extent in MMOs do you see that gendering still occurring? Is it that the designers are actually choosing to operate outside some of those conventions, or are players subverting the conventions that designers create?
In MMOs.
Yes, in MMOs kind of specifically.
Right. So sadly, I can't speak to all MMOs. That Final Fantasy XIV is really where I have most of my MMO experience, though there has been fantastic work done elsewhere on MMOs. From my experience, some of the things that might limit the relationship between gender and taking certain roles, things like stats, like if you decide to have a female character, like if she were built to have like lower strength, lower hit points, this sort of thing, then she wouldn't be a good choice for a team for some of the DPS roles. But that doesn't seem to be the case in Final Fantasy XIV. If it is, it's like really, really minor, and usually gets smoothed out as soon as you start playing. It's fairly built into the game that players can kind of do whatever they want around that, especially this game where you can take up any class at any time, so you can experiment with what you like and try to find a playstyle that fits. Sometimes I have actually noticed a pattern in-game that you do tend to see a lot of big dudes wielding axes and small women wielding staves for healing, and that a lot of these characters are really pale despite a wealth of skin color options. I don't have any like formal data on that, but I think it is a really interesting avenue to see, how those character creation systems are being used. Yeah.
So throughout your different themes, you have referenced here, one thing that we could see is in terms of protection, in terms of healing, oftentimes you're talking about mechanics that are embedded within the representations of violence in games. What are some examples that you might have where you can take either those themes or themes that maybe you haven't directly mentioned here, that the gameplay is not structured in some way around physical violence?
Glad you asked. So there is the game journey, which is kind of also somewhat towards the MMO side in that interacting with other characters in the game. Usually that character is going to be a player character who is randomized and then popped into your game world, and you don't know anything about that character except for the length of their scarf, which is an indicator kind of how much they've played. And there isn't actually all that much in terms of direct interaction that you can do with another player character in Journey, except for like walk. And so often what has been seen in that game is that say like a character with a long scarf will pop into a novice's game and lead them to places where they can make their scarf longer. And there's little room for enacting violence, that there's not really much that you can do in order to mess with another player character. So that's kind of an interesting one. Yeah, I'd have to do some other thinking in order to develop beyond there. But Journey has stuck in my head as an interesting case.
Sort of a little bit following up on Sean's question. So you have done a very sharp analysis on the embedded problems around warm interaction in the sort of dominating existing sphere of games. But you're sort of also hinting at there being some kind of promise embedded in the concept of warm interaction as well. So I just wanted to hear if you have some idea of what is, can warm interaction help us melt something or boil something, or what is the power of the warmth that you see as a promise here?
I mean, something that Mr. kind of gets at towards the end of her book, and thinking through kind of like, yeah, these kind of social, intimate interaction games that are seen less so actually in digital spaces, or at least in mobile rather than console spaces. So I think, I mean, the hope, I think, would be working on a space where empathy is a practicable skill in a game world. That, I mean, one would hope that if there are many representations of that possibility, that then that becomes more the dominant language than violence over other people.
Make it so.
Any other